that are saying anything positive about Biden are people that are absolutely and completely in the bag for Biden. Like the only people that won't acknowledge this, that they won't, or they won't talk about Biden. They'll just say, "Oh, Trump's so."
So I just watched the entire debate, 2024 presidential. Whoop whoop. I hope there's a second one. Yeah, baby. I just watched this absolutely ridiculous debate. And the funny thing is, I had generally expected that the sponsor presenter of the debate would be biased, would be terrible, would be shitbags to one and nice to the other. And surprisingly, that did not happen. They, in their nature, and I can't really say I blame them, because that's just how they do, stick to certain narratives. So they want to talk about climate change and whatever. And it's like, on grounds of how accurate the sources are that claim that certain things are a certain certainty or likelihood, how that all works may not be correct. There are questions, and they won't acknowledge those questions. They just say, nope, the thing's a thing, therefore that's what it is. The science is settled. So there's a bunch of that stuff. And I'm not even going to go into it, because I think a lot of people have come to realize that a lot of that kind of stuff is, I don't know, nonsense. I'm trying not to swear too much here. In Soviet Russia, everyone knew that the news was lying to them. Under communism, everyone knew. So it's interesting that you've got these people I expected them to praise Biden in their questioning and trash Trump, and they really didn't. They stuck to topics that their narrative has considered to be important. And the thing is, if you're not paying attention to anything else that's going on, then you have no idea about some of the things that went down in the last day or two relative to things that they were talking about. Trump mentioned it, destroyed evidence, J6 committee, broke the law of the rules of the House. That's a law, by not having the actual proper quorum for the committee, because they only had 2 people from one side of the aisle and no proper officers of the minority. That's an unfair committee. That's a biased committee, right? So they haven't reported on the fact that this has been addressed. It's been reported on other networks. And I'm not super following. I'm just keeping track of headlines and things. In some cases, finding out exactly what they say, because they're right there on the thing. Joe Biden is a formidable debater, even now, because his ass did not know where he was. Half the time, maybe even who he was. Unless he had a freaking card on his podium that just says, "You are Joe Biden." And if Trump walked in there and that shit was all a big old television fake reality show magic setup to get him to be able to be on mark and on cue and whatever, and Trump's just standing there watching him do it, Trump smoked him anyway. Trump ran circles around Biden, and CNN did not stop him. They kept everything to the time limits on the cuts, and sometimes they left the mics open and just let him hash it out back and forth. CNN surprised me with the quality of their moderation of this debate. And Trump even was like, look, let's not act like children. If you actually know the facts and do the real fact checking, or even just go to Snopes on some of that stuff, you're going to find out, certainly, that one of the two people on that debate stage knew what's real and what's not real. I think they're past their primary. Maybe they're close. Don't know if they're going to call it a day with Biden and replace him with someone else, if that's even legally feasible. As was being said on the Timcast IRL, which I watched along with the CNN on the phone, had them both playing in perfect sync. Only the people that are hardcore already on board for Biden are still on board for Biden at this point. Everyone else, I think, is going to be like, whoa, you what? And if you saw that dude on the debate there, Trump, I did not see any of the things that anyone has said of him in the negative, other than he's a little bit of a braggart, a little bit full of himself. And I can give a shit less about that if he's also really good with his policy, which he was. There are things going on in the world, geopolitics and economics, what we would call real world things, that threaten specifically American economy. It's not a boogeyman. It's a change in what currency certain business is done in, and what the exchange rate is between that currency and US dollars. It used to be done in US dollars, you see, and that inflated the value, not that same kind of inflation. We're about to get even worse inflation because oil is going to be sold in different currency, as yet to be determined, but it probably won't be American. Or they're going to go free market. Anyone can do business in their own currency with it until somebody else comes into the office of the American presidency that makes a deal that's worthwhile. If the oil producing countries in the Middle East remove their finances from our stock market and economy as well, we'll be lucky if it's still third world after it's all done. And when I say lucky, it's because otherwise it'll be somebody else's colony, somebody else's rules, in the ruins of the country that used to be there. That's dark, I know. But if they're going to say it's the most important election ever, they better have a reason. Personally, I think it's an obvious choice. People have to actually take part in the process and vote for one of them too, right? Or vote for whoever, whatever. You got to look at your down ballot too. You got to figure out who else is going to be on the ballot come November, who finances them, and vote for someone who isn't controlled by some special interest or large conglomerate or oligarch or social movement, and convince others to do the same. This is the repeated thing every election year. You have to remind everyone of this. when it comes to the big one, I think the choice is pretty obvious. People that are brainwashed or paid, it should be a landslide. Everyone has to get out and vote. And all basically vote for one guy. Prove that the system still works, because if they nonetheless let that old decrepit skin suit with a teleprompter and an earpiece back in for another 4 years, the crazy shit that all the people in the bureaucracy of the deep state and other parts, the secretaries of the cabinet and everything, the craziness that they will unleash upon this country, because there's no one at the top to keep them in check, no trustworthy people, somehow this all stays the way it is. And the only way that happens is if somebody plays games, as it were. I got to be careful, because if I talk about things now that are okay, that they're open up on, in 6 months, if I get a notification, hey, this thing from 6 months ago that you said violates our policy right now. But I think you know what I mean. What is going to be required for that to be the case? And if you haven't had a chance to really watch the entire thing, CNN put it on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can just go, hey, YouTube search CNN Biden-Trump debate. You could probably still watch it tomorrow or whenever you're seeing this. If you're like, oh, well, I haven't watched that yet. If this is important, who is on top of the football of nuclear codes? Who is ultimately where the buck stops when it comes to all the crazy shit that could be unleashed by people who got no business being in those positions, but are nonetheless appointed to those positions? If you have the slightest concern, I think you're paying attention. You better be. It's pretty clear, of the two most likely to get into the position, who is more equipped for the job. And obviously that everything that they've been saying about that guy is bullshit. And by that guy, I'm referring to Trump. And if you still can't get over it, something has been done to you. You have been victimized. And it wasn't me that did it to you, so don't be angry at me for stating the truth. Simultaneously, my suggestions feed on YouTube has included a number of things that seem to be fairly pro Vladimir Putin. And I'm not super pro Vladimir Putin by any means. The wolf must be respected for its wolfness, right? Don't forget that's a wolf. And I've seen a thing with him picking up a dog, and the guy was picking it up by the hackle, and it doesn't really hurt the dog, but it's not that cool. And Putin's like, yo, come here. And by the end of it, he kisses the dog on the head. This could have all been staged. I have no idea. It could very well just be propaganda. And for whatever reason, it's now being sent my direction. I watched the one short. I didn't like it. I backed out, and that was that. And now I'm seeing these things. Someone is making these allowable. This is some kind of fourth or fifth generational warfare being perpetrated through social media and online algorithms. So be advised of that. If you're still here by this point, be aware of that. I hope there's a second debate. I want to see how much farther south this shit can go, how much more obvious it can get. I want to see a fair one. This one was fairly fair. Thank you. This has been my TED Talk.